Is beating man coverage the key for the Buffalo Bills getting over the hump? I'm going to chime in on that and a whole lot more today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, folks, welcome in. It's time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control our discussion. And there was a bunch of very good things sent in this week, including some defensive line discussion, some questions about the unsigned former Bills players, hard knocks, going away to training camp. But I want to start with this submission from Brick by Brick. And Brick by Brick tagged me on X and tagged me in a clip that I think was pretty popular of Mina Kimes of ESPN chiming in on what the Bills must do to get over the hump and win the Super Bowl. And Brick by Brick says, can you give your take on this for Herd Mentality? I think it's a valid point, but I see lots of disagreement. And so, again, Mina Kimes commenting on what the Bills need to do to get over the hump and win the Super Bowl. And she discussed the Bills' offense needing a skill player to step up as a true man beater, a guy that can really beat man coverage. And she referenced a statistic, QBR. It's an ESPN stat that measures quarterback play. And she said that Josh Allen was second in the NFL last year in QBR versus zone coverage, but ninth versus man. And she acknowledged that ninth isn't a bad rating, right? It's still top 10, but she sees the drop off and feels like that's the most important part of what the Bills need to do to get over the hump. And I would agree with Brick by Brick here, and that it is a valid point. The Bills face a lot of man coverage. In fact, they faced the highest percentage of man coverage last year of any team. And when you look at the Bills' route running metrics against man coverage, it doesn't tell a very good story. According to the Outstanding Fantasy Points data suite, 133 different NFL receivers ran at least 75 routes last year against man coverage. The highest Buffalo Bills player in route win rate versus man coverage was Keon Coleman, who was 66th out of 133. That was the highest ranking Bills player, number 66. So yes, the Bills face a lot of man coverage, and they need to be better with their route running against man coverage. That is absolutely true. I agree it's a valid point. Where I disagree is that it's the number one thing that has to happen for the Bills to get over the hump. I think it's defense, and in particular, the defensive line and the lack of impact from the defensive line in the postseason. So there's always a lot of things, right? Football's very rarely one thing. And I think there is something to be said for the Bills' offense being better with route running against man coverage. I agree. Not as big to me as this defensive line showing up and making an impact in the postseason. I mean, to me, it's clear as day after watching the Bills over the postseason since 2020 and seeing what the issues have been. It's been D-line far more than the offense or anything to do with the offense or wide receiver route running against man coverage. It's a good talking point for sure. Not the leading factor in my mind. Chris says, what are the pros and cons to a team like the Bills for holding part of their offseason training camp offsite at a place like St. John Fisher as opposed to at home in Buffalo at their familiar site and facilities? It's a good question, Chris, and I want to actually start answering this question by highlighting some information that we recently received courtesy of Sal Marinara of the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. He had an exclusive interview with Bills Chief Operating Officer Pete Gelly. And Pete Gelly made it very clear that the Bills want to be in Rochester for camp for the foreseeable future. He said, quote, we finalized obviously a deal for this year, and then we immediately sat down and started talking about what a longer-term extension would look like. We haven't agreed on the exact term as of yet. We're going through some of those mechanics now, and once those get nailed down, we'll have a better idea on what the term will be. But our goal is to stay in Rochester for the foreseeable future. He continued to make comments like this: it works well for us. There's no reason for it to not continue. Said the setup is incredible. Said it works well for football ops. He said it's a great marketing extension for the team. Talked about the football success and said, quote, it's still perfect for us. And myself, and I know a lot of people have been wondering what training camp looks like once the new stadium is open, and if that's going to be kind of the moment where camp is in Orchard Park versus St. John Fisher. But those quotes from Pete Gelly are pretty straightforward in that the Bills have a goal to continue having training camp at St. John Fisher. So the value and the pros and cons was Chris's question. And I think the pro is the value in going away. Zero distractions. It's just football and your teammates. There's no family members. There's no kids. There's no pets. It's football and your teammates. And that type of bonding opportunity brings the team together and allows the players to connect, which is really important. You know, the Bills preach unselfishness and playing for something bigger than yourself and wanting to perform not only for your own career, but because you don't want to let the people down next to you. And the reason you feel that way is because you care about them and you know them and you've connected with them. And going away to training camp helps foster that type of culture. So I think that's the value. And I think the Bills see a lot of value in that. The cons are the logistical challenges of moving an NFL operation to another site. And I think ultimately they'll never say it out loud, but I'm sure there are a lot of players that don't love it. I'm sure most of them would prefer to not go away and leave their families behind and sleep in a dorm room at St. John Fisher. I think they'd love to be at home and do the things that they normally would do. And so there's obviously great benefit, but I'm sure there's still some players that are like, is this real life? We're going over here to do this? I mean, we could just stay home and do everything here in Orchard Park, but obviously a lot of good pros and value in what the Bills do. Bills WZA says this: can you predict any juicy storylines that HBO will want to follow for Hard Knocks? Aside from the obvious James Cook situation, my prediction would be that they follow Trey White closely. In addition to his great personality, I think his training camp journey will be interesting with his backstory of being a former first-round pick, coming back to the team after injury and having to compete against younger players. I think it's a good call out. I think Trey White will probably have a notable role in Hard Knocks. I have three things that also come to mind. The first one is Dalton Kincaid. I feel like he's a guy that's going to get some run on Hard Knocks. You hear a lot of things about his personality and how he's a bit of a goofball, but obviously a big year for him with the expectations of a first-round pick and not necessarily meeting them last year after a good rookie season. And I think you'll get some Dawson Knox carry over there. I think you'll get some Rob Boris, the Bills tight ends coach, who I think has got some personality as well, a high-energy guy that has, you know, I've been to a lot of Bills practices and games. He's kind of a guy that has his own routine and things going on. So I think you'll see Dalton Kincaid and the tight ends get some run. I think you'll 100% get the playful side of Josh Allen, where I think the world is going to become familiar with just how much of a golden retriever this guy is. And I'm excited for that to become more evident, because I think Josh Allen, in terms of sports icons and superstars, like, he's already very, very likable. I think the only reason you wouldn't like Josh Allen is if you were a fan of a team in the AFC East or you are a Ravens or a Chiefs fan. I think most people would think Josh Allen's awesome. And, you know, regardless of whatever team you root for, he's very likable. And I think showing even more of his personality and playful side will really take it to another level. And I'm sure HBO will highlight that. And then also Travis Clayton, the Bills' 7th round pick from 2024. international pathway program from England, rugby player. I think they can find some interesting storylines to uncover with that. So those are some predictions. Obviously, James Cook will be a big one. And, some general storylines just about this team and scratching and clawing to get over the hump for a team that's been close. I'm sure HBO will find some creative ways to tap into that. All right, coming up next, I'm excited to talk about Taylor Rapp and Cole Bishop and how interchangeable they are, in addition to why so many former Bills players are unsigned. We'll do that here in just a moment. Folks, be sure to stick with me. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning for a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. When I first started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and I save more. And folks, it can be really surprising to see how much certain spending habits will add up, and Monarch makes it very easy to identify those. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, folks, welcome back. The next one today comes from Rooks. Rooks says, assuming Rapp and Bishop are this year's starting safeties, and given McDermott's history with safeties, how confident are you in them playing those flex safety roles like Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde? Or do you think we will see more traditional free safety in Rapp and strong safety in Bishop? What similarities and differences do you see in each of those tandems? I know Cole needs to put out more film, but I feel Rapp and Bishop could be the starting pair for the decent foreseeable future. It's a good question. I don't look at Bishop and Rapp and see them as completely interchangeable. Obviously, Poyer and Hyde is a special pair of football players, and it's going to be hard to compare and measure any pair against them. They truly were interchangeable. No matter what you needed to be done, whether it was playing in deep zones, man coverage from the slot, low alignments to be an extra box defender, it didn't matter if it was Hyde or Poyer, you felt comfortable with either one of them filling the role. I don't see the same type of situation here. I think Taylor Rapp is more interchangeable than Cole Bishop. But I also think that comparatively speaking to Bishop, Rapp is the superior zone coverage defender, like a deep zone defender. And I think he can function as a low safety. Bishop is clearly, to me, best in lower alignments, playing forward, and he's a better man coverage player. So they offer some different things where I don't think Taylor Rapp is not a player you want functioning much in man coverage. Bishop can do that. I think you want Rapp playing in deeper alignments as a one high safety, where I don't think you want Bishop doing that as much. So they complement each other in some ways, but they're, to me, not nearly as interchangeable as you would get from a Poyer and Hyde. And then I think what comes over the top of all of that is that Bishop is a superior athlete. So you kind of think that the superior athlete would be the better deep zone defender, and it's not the case. Now, he is the better man coverage player. I think they're both really good at sniffing out the run and playing downhill. But they definitely have their strengths and weaknesses. They complement each other well, but I'm not sure I would look at them and feel totally comfortable that they're interchangeable. And certainly not to the degree that Poyer and Hyde were. Alex says, following up on the roster lock episode, do you think there's a world where maybe Larry Ogunjobi is the odd man out at defensive tackle? Hoyt is safe regardless of the PED suspension because he's on a 3-year deal, but I think Ogunjobi on a 1-year deal could be vulnerable. If the rest of the defensive tackle room is performing well, why would you kick one of them off the roster for an older player that missed valuable reps with the team? I understand what you are saying, but I do not think that Larry Ogunjobi is going to be the odd man out. And a lot of my reason for believing that is the contract that he signed. It's a 1-year, $6.7 million deal with $5.4 million guaranteed. The Bills also have 3 void years on the end of this deal, meaning that in 2026, Larry Ogunjobi is going to cost $4.2 million in cap space, even though it's a 1-year deal. So no matter what, next year in 2026, Larry Ogunjobi is eating up $4.2 million in cap space, not to mention his cap hit this year. So they made a calculated choice here, committing future cap space to have him right now. And so this would be a majorly bad deal for the Bills if Ogunjobi ends up being the odd man out. And as disclosed by Brandon Beane in his press conference, they move forward with this deal. There's probably some adjustments to it, but they move forward with this deal knowing that the suspension was coming. Now, obviously, they didn't know at that time that they would draft TJ Sanders and Deion Walker, but that's still a big cap investment this year and next for him to be the odd man out. And I'll also say this. I know that it's the offseason and we think everything's going to work out. I think it's very unlikely that all 3 of TJ Sanders, Dwayne Carter, and Deion Walker are bona fide answers this year. And look, there's a lot of variables that could go into this. Somebody could get hurt, and then you get your spot to get Larry Ogunjobi on the roster. But I think there's a good chance that one or two of those players that are either first or second year players will not be a bona fide answer, and you'll be happy that Larry Ogunjobi can step back in. So I understand the dynamic of it being a 1-year deal. You've got young players. It's going to be weird to disrupt things. But that contract and the money you have committed this year and next, boy, that'd be a pretty big black eye if he winds up not even playing a snap for this team, especially because you move forward with the deal knowing the suspension. Bub says, why do you think so many of the Bills veterans from last year are still unsigned? It's a good question, and there's a nice little list. Von Miller, Rasul Douglas, Amari Cooper, Austin Johnson, Jordan Phillips, Quentin Jefferson. All players that had roles with the Bills last year that are still looking for teams here in late June. I think it's rooted in, the reason why is rooted in that they're aging players with declining skill sets that are all coming off arguably the worst season of their career. Von Miller's 36. Now, I would definitely say that 2023 was his worst season, but 2024 was somewhat a step forward year, but very far from vintage Von Miller. Rasul Douglas, comfortably the worst year of his career since he's been a starter. Amari Cooper, I think you saw the age on him, the separation, the explosiveness, the down the field. It just wasn't the same. Jordan Phillips and Quentin Jefferson. I mean, Jordan Phillips played for 3 teams last year. Quentin Jefferson was cut late in the season and available in December for a run with the Bills. Austin Johnson didn't meet the promise. He's 31 years old. Jefferson's 32. Phillips is 33. Cooper's 31. Douglas is 31. So aging players with declining skill sets. And I think this became pretty clear. Like if you watch the tape on these players last year, you could see it. Maybe not as much with Von, but the rest of them, it's like something's missing here compared to the players that they've always been. And so when I was going through all the, you read all the articles about, top 50 free agents, top 100 free agents, and I'm seeing Rasul Douglas and Amari Cooper and expectations that they're going to get paid $15 million a season. Became pretty clear to me that this is just names. It's just names, and people aren't actually watching the tape because, as evidenced by those players still being available right now, the rust was surely on them. And, you're talking about a bunch of north of 30 players. All right, we got more to get to here coming up on the other side of it, where we'll talk about defensive line hits. and the challenge of replacing Mac Hollins. Plus, I'll talk about smoking meat. We'll get to that here in just a moment. Be sure to stick with me. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average, in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. All right, folks, welcome back. Let's continue working through these outstanding questions. The next one comes from Charlie. Charlie says, how many of the question marks at D-line, rookies, free agent signings, or player development need to be hits to have the necessary impact up front? Which are the most important? It's a good question. And the way I see it is I want for the Bills' defensive line to be 8 deep with players that you feel comfortable with. Now, there'll be varying levels of comfort that you'll have with those players, different expectations, but to have a rotation that is 8 deep that you feel like you're good. These guys can step in and give you what you need. And so if I'm counting Greg Rousseau, Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, and AJ Epinesa as 4 players of that 8 that I think varying levels of impact within them will be answers, I look at the rest of them and I think of these other 8 players, 4 of them have to be relative hits. And I use the word relative there because it's relative to what you would expect from them. So that crop of players includes Joey Bosa, Michael Hoyt, Larry Ogunjobi, TJ Sanders, Deion Walker, Landon Jackson, Dwayne Carter, and Javon Solomon. I think 4 of them have to be relative hits to go with Rousseau, Oliver, Jones, and Epinesa. Now, in terms of the most important of those players to be hits, I think it's certainly the highest ceiling players. Joey Bosa, right? I mean, if that guy is who he's capable of being, that's going to be huge. Michael Hoyt, TJ Sanders, and Landon Jackson. Those are the players that I think have the highest ceilings to be impactful players. And so I think they would be the most important as I go back to that phrase, relative hits. So if you look at this rotation 8 deep and it's Bosa, Hoyt, Sanders, Jackson, Rousseau, Oliver, Jones, and Epinesa, all right, we can go to war with that. And then, I mean, there's a good chance that more than 4 of the players I talked about, of the 8 players I talked about, will be hits. But the question was, how many need to have the necessary impact up front? How many need to be hits to have the necessary impact up front? And I think it's 8 total. And I think you can get there in a number of different ways, but I think you have some good hedges here to give yourself the wiggle room to make sure that you're getting what you need out of this defensive line. Rooks says, with Mac Hollins' departure, we lost a wide receiver, a gunner, and an inline blocker all in one player. Does the loss of him hurt more given the production of one guy and flexibility towards the roster, or do we feel more of a win having new and or different players excelling in those roles? Well, I think obviously Mac Hollins brings a lot of value to an NFL roster based on the different things that he can do. But I don't think that any individual thing that he does isn't replicatable in somebody else. When you look at the gunner role, and the gunner role for Mac Hollins was very much not a full-time thing. I think as he played more receiver, he played less special teams. Now, in high leverage moments like the playoffs, he was the gunner. or one, you have two gunners on a punt. He did fill that role. But Cam Lewis was the other primary gunner. Jamarcus Ingram got a lot of opportunity, and so did Jalen Virgil. Now, again, when the team needed it most, it was Cam Lewis and Mac Hollins. What does that look like this year? Well, the good news is you don't have Mac Hollins, but you do have Lewis, Ingram, and Virgil still in the mix. And that's partly why I'm not sleeping on that wide receiver discussion. And maybe Jalen Virgil being wide receiver 5, maybe if the Bills were to roster 6, he would be in the mix because that's an important role. So I'm not sleeping on Jamarcus Ingram making this roster over a Dane Jackson. That's why I'm not sleeping on Cam Lewis making this roster despite the presence of Jordan Hancock. That gunner conversation is a big one. And again, Hollins did do that, and he did do it in important moments, but there were other guys that filled that, and those other guys are still around. In terms of an inline blocker, I think that was completely out of necessity. I think Jackson Hawes will handle those inline blocking duties that Mac Hollins did. I think Josh Palmer can also help in that regard. I think Keon Coleman should be able to help in that regard as well. And then when you talk about the wide receiver impact, I think it's upgraded with the mix of Josh Palmer and Elijah Moore. So he can do a lot for you, but I mean, that's not uncharacteristic of other teams or other players too, right? Where like you'll get Ty Johnson, you could say, wow, Ty Johnson's an inside-outside runner. That's a great pass blocker that can do kick return, and he can also cover kicks and punts. And you're like, wow, that's a million things that he can do. Yes, and I'm not trying to diminish Mac Hollins and his departure. I certainly wanted him back. But at the same time, I wouldn't have paid him what New England paid him, and I'd much rather have this mix of receivers over the ones that the Bills lost last year in Cooper and Hollins. I'd rather have Moore and Palmer, who are 6 and 7 years younger, respectively, that have more complete wide receiver skill sets at this point than Hollins and Cooper. The last one comes from Ruckus, who says, hey, Joe, how has your life changed, obviously for the better, since you got your smoker? What new recipes or techniques are you excited to try out? And what was your favorite smoked meat thus far? So I've absolutely loved getting involved with smoking meat. I've been thinking about doing it for a while. And then almost 2 years ago, someone in my neighborhood was selling a Camp Chef smoker for $100. So I took it. It was in good shape. They just wanted to get a bigger smoker, and they were just trying to get rid of it. And they literally brought it to my house, and we put it up, and they were very helpful. And I used it and immediately fell in love with it. And I've since upgraded that smoker as well. I gave it to my neighbor, and I got a new smoker that is bigger. But yeah, I've loved it. I didn't realize how much it was going to become like a lifestyle where I'm constantly thinking about what I want to put on the smoker and like planning it out and all those types of things. I probably smoke something 2-3 times a week. Most weeks, my wife loves it. My kids love it. Both of them. My daughter Reese, who is 14 months old, she loves the meat off the smoker. So that definitely gets me motivated to get out there and cook some things. But I've done a lot. I've done a turkey. I've done a couple of turkeys. Beer can chicken always goes well for me. I've done a smoked chuck roast, wings, sausage, ham, pulled pork, ribs. Always something to put on the smoker. My favorite thing that I've cooked is pulled pork, like a Boston butt. It's easy and it's delicious. I always enjoy doing that. I, of course, experiment with things and, kind of make it your own, but I feel like it's so simple and it always turns out so good. The thing that I'm excited to try to smoke, burnt ends, I want to try them. I've been looking up some recipes and I've seen some good stuff on that. So I want to try my hand at burnt ends. I haven't messed with brisket, and maybe this is a controversial take, but I just don't see the hype with brisket. It tastes good, don't get me wrong. And I've had like great brisket, like from Champion brisket cookers in Texas. Like I think I've had the best of the best. And to me, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. I mean, the prep, the amount of time it takes to cook, and then the variance of outcomes. People put like crazy amounts of time and effort into this. And I mean, I love smoking meat, but it's not like that. I don't want to be, tied up in this overnight and all that type of stuff. So I'm not really in on the brisket. I don't know if I will try it. I don't know if I want to try it. It just doesn't move the needle for me, but I'm excited for a summer full of continuing to smoke meats and always having something in the fridge. I highly recommend it. It's been an awesome addition to my family. I would say this, though, if I had one piece of advice in almost 2 years of smoking a lot of meat, I would say that time and temperature is very important, right? You should learn time and temperature, but do not dismiss texture and appearance. Those are other elements that need to be right for your meat to be as great as you want it to be. So I remember when I first started, it was like, okay, get the smoker to 250, run it for 2 hours, and it'll hit an internal temperature of 180 and you pull it off or whatever it is. And I'd be so married to time and temperature that I was losing important things like texture and appearance. And I've started to evolve quite a bit to make sure I'm checking all those boxes. So big recommend getting involved in the meat smoker life. All right, folks, there you have it. Herd mentality in the books. Thanks for being here. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.